So the idea of a genocide against the Jews is very much alive. I don't know that it's necessarily some sort of a step-by-step plan that is being thought out at this point, although I wouldn't be surprised if it were. But it's an imperative within the religion. There's a very famous hadith, a tradition of Muhammad, in which he says the end times will not come until Muslims kill Jews, and the Jews will hide behind trees, and the trees will call out and say, "Oh, Muslim, there's a Jew hiding behind me, come and kill him." And so that is saying that Muslims can actually help to bring on the end times and the consummation of all things by killing Jews. So that's a genocidal imperative. That is something that is always part of Islam and is always something that can occur at any time. As well as far as the rest of people, or the other people in the world go, that is also part of the Islamic faith, that the non-Muslims must either be killed, converted to Islam, or subjugated under the rule of Islamic law. And so while that would not necessarily be a genocidal imperative, it often would be in practice if the non-Muslims were to resist Islamization. The groups and names are really all the Islamic groups that you can name. You know, Hamas, Hezbollah, Islamic Jihad in regard to Israel, but also the Islam is. We are constantly told Islam is not a monolith, but actually the Islamic groups around the world all believe essentially the same things. They read the same Quran, they revere the same Muhammad as the excellent example of conduct, and so it's not really true that Islam is not a monolith. You know, in terms of everything that matters in regard to what unbelievers need to be concerned about, there's a remarkable unanimity of Islamic teaching across various sects and schools. And so really any Islamic group should be questioned. Islamic groups in the West should be asked. If public officials were more aware of this problem, they would be saying, what is your stance toward these imperatives of warfare against unbelievers? Can you renounce them definitively and for all time? And do so in word and in deed as well. And do so in a manner such that we can see that you're actively teaching against these things in your mosques and schools. But nobody is on that case. Well, it's not just in the future, it's happening now. The Christians are being violently persecuted in Egypt, in Nigeria, in Pakistan, in Iraq, in Indonesia. Really, everywhere there are Muslim majorities and Christian minorities, the Christian minorities are being brutalized and victimized. And that is in line with the idea that the Christians in Islamic lands must submit to the Muslim rule and be deprived of basic rights. And if they do not, then they are considered to be infidels at war with Islam and can lawfully be killed. And so these things are flashpoints now in societies like Egypt, because Egypt has been nominally an Arab republic, not an Islamic republic, and doesn't impose all of Islamic law. And so the Muslims now, who are trying to bring about a Sharia state, an Islamic state in Egypt, they consider that the Christians have too many rights and are too assertive in the society, and so they are brutalizing them, hoping to enforce their subjugation. The mastermind behind these acts is Muhammad and his Quran, but on the contemporary scene, the main figure, I would say, is Sheikh Yusuf al-Qaradawi, who is the most revered sheikh in the Islamic world. He is internationally renowned and respected. He has a regular television program on Al Jazeera, which is actually a network that he helped to found, as well as he is the force behind Islam Online, and he is the spiritual leader of the Muslim Brotherhood. He had not been allowed to speak in Egypt during the reign of Nasser, Sadat, and Mubarak, but now he was recently welcomed back to Cairo by a very huge crowd and enthusiastically received. He preaches the necessity to wage jihad warfare against unbelievers and subjugate them. He has justified suicide attacks against Israeli civilians. He is essentially a criminal mastermind. And so he is probably the main one responsible, but really He doesn't believe, here again, he doesn't believe anything different from what the vast majority of Muslim imams around the world believe. He just speaks about it more openly and with a larger platform. No, I don't think women in Islamic nations have any chance to assert their rights. In Islamic law and in the Quran, women are essentially possessions of men and have no rights whatsoever. And so, or few rights that are sharply defined by Islamic law, and they must not transgress those boundaries. So they really don't have much chance or even much interest in asserting their rights because they're taught from the beginning that this is the natural order of things. They don't have any chance. They would be killed if they did that. Well, Islam is a religion of war and Christianity is a religion of peace. Islam teaches in the Quran, it says Muhammad is the apostle of Allah. Those who follow him are merciful to one another but ruthless to the unbelievers. Whereas Jesus says, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you. Um, Islam says to take revenge in the fashion in which you were injured, and Christianity says turn the other cheek. And so there are huge differences in the core teachings of Islam and Christianity. People often obscure this point and say, well, Christianity is 600 years older than Islam, and so in 600 years, Islam will be like Christianity is today. Well, in the first place, I don't have 600 years to wait. And in the second place, there is no indication whatsoever that Islam will develop in the same way as Christianity. Certainly, in the past, in the history of the Church, there are times in which violence was perpetrated in the name of Christianity, but this was an aberration that was not justified by the teachings of Christ, whereas the violence committed in the name of Islam is amply justified by the teachings of the Quran and Muhammad. And so the religions are different at the base, at the foundation. They're not going to develop in the same way either. And there's no indication that Islam will become peaceful as Christianity became more peaceful from the time of the Crusades to today. The Christianity developed in that way because people were recalling the teachings of Christ. But there's nothing like that in Islam to recall. Well, Christians should be educating themselves about the teachings of Islam. They should be resisting efforts to impose Islamic law, resisting the use of Islamic law in German courts, which is already happening, and trying to wake up their fellow citizens to the magnitude of this problem. Christians ought to be at the forefront of this effort because of the teachings of Islam mandating the subjugation of Christians and teaching that anyone who believes that Jesus is the Son of God is under the curse of Allah, and that anyone who believes that Jesus is divine is an unbeliever. They should understand that these things are not just statements of religious competition, but statements of declarations of an intention to destroy Christian societies, destroy post-Christian societies, and to deprive Christians of their basic rights. And to understand that no amount of outreach or negotiation, compromise or concession is going to change that imperative. The reason is that in Islam there is a fatalism that discourages initiative, that people say these things will happen inshallah if God wills, and they essentially accept passively the situation that they are given because it is as Allah wills. Also, there has never been a work ethic in Islam. There's never been an idea that there was anything worthwhile or commendable about doing work on this earth. As a matter of fact, Muhammad mandated, as the Quran mandates, that Muslims must fight against unbelievers, subjugate them, and make them pay this tax, the jizya. And the jizya is the source of the livelihood for the Muslims. The Caliph Umar explained that, one of the first successors of Muhammad, that the tax that the Muslims collected from the unbelievers they had conquered would be the source of the livelihood of the Muslims. Muhammad established that right from the beginning. When he moved to Medina, he didn't tell his followers, now start farming or open up shops he told them, raid the caravans of the unbelievers. And so the source of the livelihood of the Muslims throughout Islamic history has been the industry of the unbelievers, not of the Muslims. That's why jihad has to continue, so that the prosperity of the Islamic states can be established by the wealth of the unbelievers. And so this is why Islamic societies are so impoverished these days, because they have bled dry their native unbelievers and have not been able successfully to carry out jihads against new groups of unbelievers who would be able to finance their return to prosperity, with the notable exception, of course, of the oil wealth of the Saudis, which functions in the same way, and of the other oil-producing states. But the idea of jihad is essentially and fundamentally economic, in order to foster the growth of the Islamic states, and this is what we see happening in Europe as well. That vast populations of Muslims are coming to Europe ostensibly to work, but so many of them go on the dole because they consider it their due that the unbelievers support them. Act before it's too late. Wake up, realize that you are threatened, and that you have to fight to save what you have, and that fighting to defend your home and your family is not against the teachings of Christ. Self-defense is not against the teachings of Christ, and that this is what is called for these days, that the world is not all kumbaya and let's hold hands and sing songs and everything will be fine. The world is a harsh place, and these people are coming to kill or enslave you. Well, they have to undertake a variety of initiatives, as I explained before, to resist Islamization, to resist the assertion of Islamic law in Germany, and to insist that everyone who is a citizen should have the same rights and the same laws, and that there should be no special rights for special classes, which is exactly what Islam mandates for Muslims, that Muslims have rights that the non-Muslims do not enjoy. And so they are trying to establish that in Germany and elsewhere. This is what the Christians must resist. It takes a variety of forms. They have to fight against the legal initiatives, the cultural and societal initiatives, the efforts to establish in workplaces and in schools special accommodations for Muslims, halal food, the introduction of special break times at factories for prayers, for the Muslims, that the non-Muslims can't take those breaks, and so on. I see these things happening in America. I expect they're probably happening here also. And this is the kind of thing that is an assertion of the principle that where Islamic law and Western law and practice conflict, it is the Western law and practice that has to give way. That's what Christians should be aware of its implications, aware of where it's leading, and they should be resisting it now. Well, the main thing is to raise public awareness right now. And so, yes, they need to write to the papers, try to alert, but not just write letters to the editor, but try to alert reporters to what's going on, to educate them about the implications of it, to hold public rallies, as we tried to yesterday, to raise awareness of this problem, to challenge their public officials and their elected representatives to be active about these issues, and to exhort the people in their churches not to vote for public officials who are compromised on these issues. Work hard, pray, hope, and don't worry. Thank you.